For 12s hoping to see the Seahawks under the lights as much as possible, there's plenty of primetime flavor on the Seahawks 2026 schedule.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s for tuning in to this live schedule reveal episode, whether you're in Fort Benning, Georgia, or tuning in from Pullman, Washington. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. It is schedule release day. We now know all 17 of Seattle's games, when they're going to be playing, what time they're going to be playing, all the toughest stretches, the soft landing spots, all the other perks and the not so perks that are going to be on this schedule. I'm going to be breaking it all down here on today's episode. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The long wait is over. The 2026 schedules for all 32 NFL teams officially being announced today. The Seattle Seahawks, the defending champions, set to open things up. As we talked about yesterday, there were reports on Wednesday. The Seahawks are playing the Patriots at Lumen Field on Wednesday night, September 9th, to open the season, a rematch of Super Bowl 60. The Patriots have to watch the Seahawks put the banner up into the rafters, and then they get to play the team that beat them in February. Certainly, that's got some revenge game to it for players like Drake May. The Seahawks hoping to hold serve and get off to a fast start as they begin their title defense. We now know the rest of the schedule, and early on for the 12s that want to get a lot of opportunities to see the Seahawks play at home, you're going to get a lot of those early on in this schedule. Even though the Seahawks play on the road in week 2 and 3, they're playing the Cardinals and the Commanders on the road. 5 of the next 6 games, starting with a home afternoon matchup with Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, and the Los Angeles Chargers. You've got 5 out of 6 games there at Lumen Field in a 6-week span. They're only going to be making 1 trip in a plane during that time, and that is a Thursday night battle against the Denver Broncos, the only Thursday night game the Seahawks have. They do have that Wednesday nighter to open the season. That won't be on short rest, though. So that is certainly going to be advantageous for Seattle. And they've also got their first matchup with the 49ers coming at Lumen Field in week 5. So you look at just those first 6 games, it is a 50-50 split. But beyond that point, the next 3 weeks going into the midway point of the season, Seattle's got primetime matchups at home against Kansas City and Chicago, then faces Arizona for the second time at home. So again, they get 5 out of 6 games in a 6-week span at Lumen Field. So they're going to get a lot of their 9 home games out of the way in the first couple months of the season. A large chunk of them, they are going to be playing a lot of games in Seattle, including a number of primetime games. And you look at the rest of the schedule and the way that this lines up for the Seahawks. Week 10, they go on the road to face Clint Kubiak, their former offensive coordinator, and the Raiders. Week 11 bye week, which I've always been a believer that as an NFL team, you want that bye week to be after you've played 6 or 7 games minimum. Seattle gets that this year. They get that week 11 bye, and then they come out of that bye, go to San Francisco to play the 49ers at Levi Stadium. This is where the schedule flips some. You are still going to see a handful of home games left on the schedule, but 3 of the final 4 games on the road at the Eagles, at the Panthers, and finishing up with the Rams. Maybe the most interesting thing that we saw on this schedule, the Rams, both games against them coming in the final 3 weeks. A lot of times it's not ideal to play the same team twice in a 3-week span, but we have seen the Seahawks do this against other NFC West foes over the years. There's nothing unfamiliar about it. We have also seen it with regular season and playoffs. The 49ers last year, they actually played 2 consecutive games against the San Francisco 49ers. That obviously will not happen in the regular season, but overall, this sets up to be a pretty nice schedule for the Seahawks. I think that the most notable thing, and we'll get deeper into the woods as this show goes on, at some of the big positives, the big advantages, and there's certainly some negatives in this schedule. There's no such thing as an NFL schedule that is perfect. There are some things that the Seahawks probably are wishing didn't happen on their schedule, but you're always going to have, especially when you have a first place schedule like the Seahawks have, playing first place teams from a year ago, you're going to be playing a lot of really good football teams. The biggest advantage that early on, that soft landing spot. Again, I think you just look at those beginning games. You don't take anybody lightly in the NFL, but Arizona in week 2, I think the Cardinals have a real chance to get the number 1 pick this next year. I just don't expect them to win very many games. The Commanders are going to have Jaden Daniels back healthy. They made some changes in the offseason, but that is still one of the oldest rosters, even with what they've done this offseason in the NFL. I don't know if they're going to be closer to last year's team or the one that went to the NFC title game 2 years ago. They're kind of going to be one of the curiosities, so to speak, in the league, but still, they had a losing record last year. They struggled. They've got an older team. That is a game the Seahawks have to be feeling good about. And you get the Chargers, 49ers back-to-back weeks at home, and you've regained that home field advantage over the past year. The 12s really brought it last season. So you're looking at a stretch there where I think they can go 4-1 or even 5-0. I think they have an opportunity to get off to a very fast start to open the season. Of course, they could lose 2 or 3 of those games. This is the NFL. There is no such thing as a gimme, but I think that is a fairly soft landing spot for the Seahawks. And I think you also have to consider all the tough games they've got coming up after that. They continue to have home games. That is going to benefit them. I do think the back half of the schedule, that might be where things are the most murky for the Seattle Seahawks, just because I even look at the home games. Dallas and New York, I keep saying this, and maybe the Giants will prove me wrong on this. I just think New York has got a lot of exciting young talent, and playing them earlier in the season would have been advantageous. I wonder if playing them in the second half, when, John Harbaugh has had time to work with that roster, a lot of their young players have gained experience. I'm wondering if the Giants could be feeling kind of frisky at that point in terms of trying to battle for a wild card spot. That is not going to be an easy game. Those are your 2 home games opening that 6-game stretch, and then you get 3 out of 4 on the road after that. So that stretch of the schedule, you better hope that you played really good football the first 2/3 of the season, because you're going to have a lot of real tests. You're going to be on the road a lot more down the stretch. So I think that is maybe the most noteworthy thing that jumps out in terms of looking at the schedule, that, maybe in terms of what might be the hardest stretch. You could look at a couple different ones, and I'll examine these a little bit deeper as we get into the show. But those are the stretches. That is one of them that really jumps out to me in terms of being one where the Seahawks have a number of tough games, and playing the Rams twice in the final 3 weeks. You can't tell me there was not intentionality to that with the NFL. I know they say that this is, the schedules are randomly put together. There are hands in there manipulating things, though. There is no way that they did not do that on purpose just to get it set up. And you've got the first matchup coming on Christmas Day, a Friday game, and that one will be at Lumen Field. So Seahawks fans that are hoping to get a really nice present on Christmas Day with a Seahawks win, it's going to be a tough one to earn against the Rams coming back, looking to avenge the losses they had at Lumen Field last year. So those 2 teams, we don't get to see them play again until we get into late December, and then we get to see them twice in 3 weeks, and that could really decide the NFC West. It could decide the number 1 seed again. We'll see where things stand at that point, but that closing stretch is one that we're going to have to continue to look closer at, because I think that's the murkiest part of Seattle's schedule. We're going to continue to dive deep into the schedule with some positives. I'm going to glance through some things that really stood out to me, combing through this 17-game slate that were on the positive, the pro side of things for the Seahawks. We'll get to that up next here on our schedule reveal edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. We can stream anything, order food in minutes, do everything from our phones, and somehow buying tickets to live events still feels harder than it should be. Long lines, confusing checkouts, prices jumping at the last second. It shouldn't be that complicated. That's why there is Game Time. It gives the fans the advantage and makes getting tickets fast and simple. I was just looking at tickets for a few upcoming games that just became available for the Seahawks, and it took mere minutes to find great options. You can see the full price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. The seat views are huge. You can check your exact view before you buy, and zone deals or where you pick the section and save even more. 2 taps, you got great seats locked in. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Support for today's episode comes from Square, the system that helps fix one of the biggest headaches in running a business. Starting a business is exciting, but actually running it, take my word for it, that's where things can get complicated fast. Payments, inventory, staff, scheduling, online orders is a lot to manage. That's why Square brings everything together into one connected system. Square helps you take payments, track sales, manage inventory, and keep your business running smoothly without juggling a bunch of disconnected tools. One thing I've noticed at some of my favorite local diners is how seamless everything feels when they use Square. Checkout is quick, receipts are easy, the whole experience just feels more organized. There's a local coffee shop I love that uses Square, and it makes everything simple from fast payments to loyalty, rewards. And as a customer, it's convenient. From the business side, you can tell it helps the owner stay focused on serving people instead of constantly troubleshooting systems. If you're starting a business or running one that deserves better tools, Square helps you sell, manage, and grow without slowing down. Right now, you can get $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/LockedOnNFL. That's SQUARE.com/go/LockedOnNFL. Run your business smarter with Square and get started today. Welcome back to the schedule reveal edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the show. You live your team every day. Now take it up a notch by joining the Everydayer Club, Locked On Seahawks. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Seahawks, exclusive members-only Discord chat access to talk to hosts such as myself, and much more. It's all just $5 a month or $50 a year. You can check it out at lockedonseahawks.supercast.com. The schedule officially being unleashed today. We now know not only who the Seahawks are going to be playing in 2026, but when they are going to be playing, the times, the dates, the number of primetime games. And like any year with the schedule, there are positives and there are negatives. Let's start with the positives because I think there are a ton of them in this schedule. I've certainly had ones that I've looked at in the past covering the Seahawks where I felt like they got slighted a lot more. First and foremost, I know they have a Wednesday game to open the season, but that's obviously not on short rest. It's the season opener. They only have one Thursday game this year. It's a huge one. They're going against the Denver Broncos. They do play a Friday game that is short rest, but they played on Saturday, not Sunday the week before. So you're still going to have almost a normal rest week there. The only time they're going to have that short rest with only 3 days in between games is going to be when they play the Denver Broncos in Denver in week 6. And that's going to be a critical out of conference game on Amazon Prime. But other than that, they don't have any of those really short rests. So the champs get that benefit. I think that is one certainly worth discussing. The second thing, first and foremost, under the lights, the primetime games galore. Now, I originally reported 7 primetime games. The game in Philadelphia that is going to be on December 19th, that is week 15. That is a 5 o'clock start in Philly. It's a 2 o'clock start in Seattle. So technically that is not going to be considered a primetime game, even though it's a standalone game against the Eagles. That game is still, in my opinion, that should still be counted as primetime because it's going to be under the lights for most of that game in Philly, even if it is on the Eastern time zone. But you have 6 games starting after 5 p.m. Pacific time. New England in the season opener, Broncos in that Thursday night matchup I just mentioned, Chiefs and Bears back-to-back weeks, Sunday and Monday Night Football, another Monday nighter against the Dallas Cowboys in week 13, and then the Christmas matchup on Friday, the 25th of December against the Rams at Lumen Field. So you're going to get tons of primetime games, and there is still a possibility. I also want to point this out for fans that technically, since they're not counting the Eagles one, the max you can have is 7. The Seahawks have 6. There is still a chance at the end of the year when you have the ability to flex games. That Rams-Seahawks rematch in Week 18, just 2 weeks after the first time they play each other, there is a very strong possibility that that game ends up getting flexed into a primetime slot. We don't know the time yet for that season finale game. So there's a real good chance that that ends up getting flexed into a Saturday or Sunday night primetime slot, and the Seahawks add another one to the bill. Carolina in Week 17. Who knows where the Panthers go this year? I could see that being a team that ends up threatening for that crown in that division again in the NFC South. If the Panthers are right there and the Seahawks are right there in contention, maybe that game could potentially get flexed. So there is more room to add more primetime games down the line. But for now, you've got 6. You've got that Eagles standalone game that's an afternoon game, at least Pacific time, an afternoon game for the Seahawks. So they've got a bunch of games where nationally televised audiences are going to be watching. There aren't going to be other games going on. A real chance for the defending champions to have a lot of attention on them in the Pacific Northwest. The second big thing, limited miles. The Seahawks, usually when we're having this schedule reveal, I don't normally feel like it's a choice. It's like, well, the Seahawks are going to be traveling, 35,000 miles just by default, because basically the Seahawks are up, as Rob likes to call it, in South Alaska. There's built-in geography issues that lead to that. But the Seahawks are actually 10th this year out of 32 teams in miles traveled, which that is very low by Seahawks standards. And they only have 2 10 a.m. starts. It could have been 3, but since that Eagles game is going to start at 5 o'clock Eastern time, that is obviously not going to be that 10 a.m. Pacific time start. It's going to be at 2 p.m. instead. So the only ones you've got, the Commanders and the Panthers. And I mentioned the Panthers game being Week 17. Who knows if that ends up getting flexed? We don't know what Carolina is going to play like this year. If that's flexed, though, now you have 1 10 a.m. start. The Seahawks have been really good in those early windows under Mike Macdonald and previously under Pete Carroll, for that matter. So it hasn't really been an issue, but you're still going to take that benefit not having very many of those real early Pacific time starts. The Seahawks only have 2 of them. You don't have any international games. I know our international listeners, I apologize if that is something that you're bummed out about, but from a travel standpoint, that's another reason the Seahawks are way in the total poll compared to usual in terms of miles traveled, because the 49ers are going out of the country twice. The Rams are also playing in Australia against the 49ers. So a lot of the West Coast teams are traveling more than the Seahawks are this year. So you've got less travel, less trips in general, less of those long trips to the East Coast, and only 2 10 a.m. games. That is always a big plus when you are a West Coast team. And I think from a viewing standpoint, the other thing that jumps out to me as a big positive, the potential reunion date. Seattle lost 5 free agents. 4 of those players are going to be playing against the Seahawks at some point this season. Reek Woolen with the Eagles in Week 15. Ken Walker III with the Chiefs in Week 7. Kobe Bryant with the Bears in Week 8. And even Derek Young, Week 10 with the Las Vegas Raiders. The only free agent that left, Boye Mafe with the Bengals, he's the only one that's not going to be playing against the Seahawks this year since Cincinnati is not on their schedule. But you have a lot of dates for revenge games for these guys that left Seattle after winning the Super Bowl. And the great thing about it is 2 of those 3 games that I just showed up there with Ken Walker and Kobe Bryant, they're going to be playing in Seattle. They're going to be back at their old stomping grounds at Lumen Field. Reek Woolen's the only one that won't get to do that. The Seahawks playing at Lincoln Financial Field in Week 15 against the Eagles. So you've got that factor. And then Brian Schottenheimer, first time since he became a head coach, gets to come back to Seattle for a regular season game. The Seahawks and the Cowboys Monday Night Football. I think Dallas is going to be a much improved team this year. They did a really nice job of bolstering their defense through the draft, made some interesting moves in free agency as well. I think Dallas has a chance to be right in the mix in that NFC East that's going to be pretty wide open this year, in my opinion. That could be a game that it plays a big role in seeding in the NFC in general in Week 13. And Ryan Schottenheimer, his tenure in Seattle did not end on good terms with the philosophical differences and the issues with the quarterback, offensive coordinator connection, everything that went on. You know that he would love to go back to Seattle now as a head coach and get a win with the Dallas Cowboys. So you've got some revenge factor on the coaching side as well with Brian Schottenheimer and the Cowboys coming in week 13. So those all jump out as big positives to me when you consider all the primetime games, the fact that almost all of those primetime games, 5 of the 6 are at Lumen Field. 12s are going to get a lot of time in front of the nationally televised audiences out there to really show their stuff, being loud and making life miserable for opponents against some really good teams as well. A lot of Seattle's big games are going to be at Lumen Field, and the 12s get to have a chance to make a real impact and continue that incredible home field advantage that was rekindled in that Super Bowl run last season. Coming up next, yes, I just mentioned there's a ton of positives, but there's still some things that aren't so positive about this schedule. I'm going to dive into some of the negatives looking over the 17-game slate. That'll be coming your way up next year on our schedule reveal edition, Locked On Seahawks. If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscription spending and bills, it can get really overwhelming fast. And that's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. It tracks all your subscriptions in a single spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going, and you can set budgets, get alerts, and stay on top of upcoming bills. It just makes everything feel more organized and give you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your saving. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Welcome back to the schedule reveal edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the show. For those of you watching live on YouTube, make sure in the chat to let us know how many wins you think the Seahawks are going to have this season, what final record they're going to have in 2026, now that we know the schedule. Looking forward to combing through a few of those real quick at the end of the show. Let's talk this schedule a little bit more. The Seahawks announcing their official 17-game slate. We had that schedule out, I believe, at 2 p.m. today and ended up being 99.9% accurate. I guess in wording, they're not counting the Eagles game as a primetime game, even though it starts at 5 o'clock in Philadelphia. It's a mid-afternoon game for the Seahawks. That still is a standalone game. The Seahawks have 7 of those in their schedule, 5 of them being at Lumen Field. That is a big plus, all those games happening at home. But not everything is perfect with this schedule, and you can expect there's always going to be a few things that you can nitpick, or there's going to be a few things that are difficult. The first and foremost thing, this is a season where the NFC, because you have an odd number of games every year since the new CBA, last year they had 8 home games, 9 road games. This year, the NFC gets the extra home game, 9 home games, 8 road games. So you have that advantage. The Seahawks have a very road-heavy finish still to this schedule, though, and a lot of it has to do with what happened early in the schedule, having a stretch where from week 4 to week 9, 5 of those 6 games are at Lumen Field. The downside of that is, we just played so many of those games at home. Eventually, you have to travel. And that's what happens at the end of the season, starting in week 15 in Philadelphia, week before Christmas. That's a game that could be a matchup of 2 potential NFC championship contenders. You got to win in Philly, which is never easy to do. Then you turn around and play the Rams at home on Christmas night. That is going to be a challenging game, regardless of what stadium you play in. Carolina on the road, one of the few 10 a.m. starts they have. That's the next week in week 17. And then back on the road at SoFi Stadium for the season finale, 2 games against the Rams in the final 3 weeks. So it's not just those 2 games. The fact you're playing maybe the best team in the NFC in the Rams, you're playing them twice in the final 3 weeks. And then 3 of your final 4 games are on the road. 4 of your final 7 games are on the road. So it's kind of an unbalanced schedule from that perspective, and you get some really tough games in that final month on the road. In Philly, Carolina is not an easy place to play and win, and I think that's going to be a solid football team. They made the playoffs a year ago, and then you got to play the Rams week 18 at SoFi Stadium, where Mike Macdonald has had issues trying to win games, and so did Pete Carroll. That has been a tough place for the Seahawks to win games unless Matt Stafford's not playing and Jimmy Garoppolo was quarterback a couple of years ago in a game that didn't matter in the standings. The Rams already clinched the division. It's been hard for Seattle to win in SoFi Stadium. They're going to have to try to do that in week 18. So that unbalanced schedule, a lot of road games late in the year, that's going to be something to look at, especially when the weather can be nasty in Philadelphia in December. Charlotte can be rainy. They can get some snow occasionally there in December, early January. So you could have some weather issues there, a lot of road games down the line to close out of the season. That is something to watch closely. And then you've got two really tough stretches. Now, as I mentioned, the first one, maybe the godsend in all of this is you get to play most of these games at Lumen Field in front of the 12s, but you still have to play 5 teams that made the playoffs last year. Well, 4 of them, Chiefs did not make it last year, but 4 of these 5 teams did not make the playoffs. The Chiefs were without Patrick Mahomes at the end of the year. They're going to have Patrick Mahomes back healthy. He will absolutely be back in the lineup by the time these teams get together in week 7. So you've got to play a team that's got Super Bowl pedigree in Kansas City. The Chargers are kind of a dark horse everybody's talking about that's bolstered their O-line. They've got Mike McDaniel now as their offensive coordinator. A lot of people have them as a dark horse to make the Super Bowl. So you got to play them, the 49ers, back-to-back weeks at home. Denver got so close last year before Bo Nix had that ankle injury and missed the AFC Championship game. You got to play the Denver Broncos on the road, short week, Thursday Night Football. Then after that, the Chiefs and the Bears back-to-back weeks. Like, it doesn't matter where you're playing. That is a hard schedule. That is a lot of really good football teams. The worst team from those 5 last year, record-wise, was Kansas City, and they are going to be back this year. Maybe not back in Super Bowl driver's seat mode, but they are going to be right back in the thick of things to win that AFC West division and be a playoff threat with Mahomes back healthy. Some of the additions, Ken Walker III being one of them. He gets to come back to Seattle. That is a really tough stretch of 5 games. You're lucky that most of them are at home. It is still going to be difficult to get those W's, though, with so many good teams. That is maybe the toughest stretch they have in terms of the actual teams they are going to be playing in a 5-game window. There's no question about it. But then that end of the season slate with 2 games against the Rams, playing the Eagles on the road. And again, Carolina is not a pushover. Carolina is a team that we saw last year. Yeah, they had a losing record. They won their division. The South was weak. But Carolina's got a lot of good young players. They've got a good coach, Dave Canales, formerly one of Pete Carroll's assistants. And I think they did some nice things this offseason to make their football team even better. That is a really difficult final 4 games. And even before that, I mentioned it, you have the Cowboys and Giants. They're both home games, but I'm expecting those teams to both be a lot better this year. I'm really bullish on the Giants, surprising some people. I think second half, they're going to be even tougher. They're going to be a pesky team. Even if they're not quite in the playoff hunt, they're going to be a team that you don't necessarily want to play. And I think John Harbaugh is going to be able to get that team where they need to go. So I just look at that last 6 games and really the final 4 with the very heavy road tendencies there. That is going to be a make or break stretch, at least in terms of winning the division. If you want to get back into that number 1 seed, driver's seat, and get the lone bye in the NFC, you're going to have to do so like you did last year, where you finished with a lot of road games against really good football teams. They are going to have to do it again a second straight year in the dog days of December and early January. And that is never an easy thing to do, even if the Seahawks made it look like it was last year. Year to year, it is difficult to be able to do that. So I look at those 2 stretches. Those are the make or break stretches for me. I think if Seattle can get out of the gates quick, like I believe they can, then they can put themselves in a position where you can lose a few games in those stretches and still have a shot maybe at getting an NFC West title, maybe getting that number 1 seed. But you can't lose too many games if you have those as your ambitions. Those are going to be 2 really, really tough stretches on Seattle's schedule, especially with that road-heavy finish in December and in January. Looking at our fan comments here for your predicted records here, seeing who's got a few that have been posted on our chat. Make sure to post your record. Mike A66, very tough schedule. I say Hawks will be 10-7. So that'd be the same record they had 2 years ago, and they missed the playoffs with that record. That would be tough to get by if they have that kind of record. Usually 10 wins get you the playoffs, but it doesn't always in terms of what you're going to be able to do on the field. I don't see any other predictions in our chat. We do have one here on X from Brian, and he says 14-3. We match last year's record, albeit starting a little faster and having a little more issue at the end of the season. Same end result, but a 14-3 record. General consensus looking at the Emerald Spectrum, our article that I posted, right now more than 50% of fans expect that the Seahawks are going to win at least 12 games. So there's a lot of confidence in the defending champs. And we've also got another one here coming off of YouTube. Snarky B, I see a low of 9-8 and a ceiling. It would be 14-3 unless it was 14-2-1. Final prediction 13-4. We've also got 13-4 from Rock Mandrum's 3-4-3. So again, there's a lot of confidence, and there should be in the fan base when your team's the defending champion. You've got most of your roster back. You've got Mike Macdonald and pretty much most of his coaching staff back, other than losing Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. There's a lot of confidence that this team can go out and continue winning a lot of football games. But as I mentioned, there are a few stretches, especially if they battle more injuries. Hopefully that won't be the case. But there are a few stretches where things could get a little bit murky in this schedule with a number of really talented teams jumbled together into tough 4 or 5 game stretches. That's going to determine what this Seahawks team ends up doing in 2026 and whether they can get back to the top of the NFC West, the top of the NFC, and maybe get that second straight Lombardi trophy. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, Nick Lee and I are going to be diving even further into the schedule. Two of us are going to have some fun ranking our most enticing games, and we'll have some predictions coming out of the schedule reveal. Make sure to watch, and thanks for tuning in to this Thursday episode. Go Hawks.